we were living the breadline life. So they fled across the border. And by fled, I mean on foot. We had 4 siblings at that time. They had to leave 2 of them behind because they couldn't physically carry everyone.
Welcome to the Obsessed Podcast.
Welcome back to another powerful episode of the Obsessed Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Stewart, and this week I am so excited to announce my friend, the Humble CEO. He is a don of passive revenue and personal development up in Canada, and he has achieved so much at such a young age. He has such great tips. We've had amazing conversations off the microphone just through normal conversation that I was really excited we were able to take some time, put together our thoughts, and really bring value back to you and your audience. So we'll just jump right into it. Please join me in welcoming Benjamin Morisson to the Obsessed Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Evan. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, man. I'm so glad we could make this work. Well, and the funny thing is, you have a big following and a business, and your life is up in Canada, but you're kind of down in my world, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. I'm actually hanging out in Austin, Texas. One of the benefits of having a company and being able to travel is getting a chance to spend time reflecting and connecting with amazing folks like you. So yeah, I'm actually not too far from you, I think.
I love it. Yeah, you're a couple hours away, but in Texas, everything is measured in time, right? So instead of miles elsewhere or kilometers, out of the United States, it's always how much time does it take to get there, right? So, it's only a 3-hour or 45-minute or 2-hour, whatever it may be. So it's pretty funny. We operate a little differently down here.
I love it. No big deal.
Well, we'll just jump right into it because I cannot wait to dissect you, your story. And before we go deeper, I want to take a moment just for you, give you a platform to describe really who you are, what you're about, and what you do. What do you answer when people ask, who is the Humble CEO?
So Humble, basically for me, is a representation of where I started in life. I was born in a communist country of Romania during a time of oppression, during a time of communism, during a time of dictatorship. And my parents wanted more for our family. They wanted freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom to pursue great things in life. And that just was not an option during those times in Romania. So we were living the breadline life. And, no joke, this was a real thing for us where we would have to go and wait for milk, for bread. And
oh my gosh,
my father wanted to get out there. My father was a Christian and my parents were both Christians, and they wanted to be able to preach the gospel and do things. And it just was not an option back then. Everything was stipend. So in a time where it was scary and difficult, my parents made a decision to live through faith, and they decided to pursue freedom. So they fled across the border just before the communist revolution. And by fled, I mean on foot. They would hide during the day and run at night. And they were part of a caravan that escaped Romania and fled to Austria, which was a country that allowed them to become refugees. So we had 4 siblings at that time. They had to leave 2 of them behind because they couldn't physically carry everyone. So I ran with them, being the oldest and being able to walk. They justified that I could run with them. So our family was separated for about a year before I saw my brother and sister again while we were living in the refugee camp in Austria. We were so blessed, and by the grace of God, we made it to Canada. Someone sponsored us to come here. My parents had a few more children. So we're now a family in Canada, the oldest of 9 children, and I grew up with this massive sense of responsibility, a sense that I need to impact the world in such a significant way. Otherwise, what was the point of my parents' sacrifice? So for me, it's not a choice to live in abundance and to help people. For me, it's an obligation. I feel that a massive privilege and a massive responsibility at the same time. So the humble comes from never forgetting what your story is. I believe that a story is the most important thing a person can have, because a story is what ties you to another human being. Because in sharing stories with each other, we start to reveal who we are, and we start to reveal the relationships that we can truly have with each other through our own unique story. So I truly think it's one of the most important things. So I'm glad to share it. I'm glad to share our experiences, what happened, but that's what drives me every day, is being able to help other folks realize that there's so much more to life There's so much abundance in life. I do not live in a scarcity mindset. I live in a place where I truly believe that we can impact, help each other, become wealthy, and then create abundance all around. So that's where the humble comes from. And that's what I'm truly all about.
Wow. Well, when you share your story, I mean, it gives me chills, because a lot of people talk about oppression and going through really tough times, but it's not until you actually physically escape something like your government when they're oppressing the people that you can actually talk about, well, what does it really look like when you're living in a not free society and everything that you do is monitored and controlled by somebody other than yourself? And so, I mean, you literally come from such intense oppression that you can't think straight to an amazing freedom that you and your family have found in Canada. And I think there's a beautiful tension between that, right? Because you've developed that grit internally, that moral and ethical responsibility to do more for you, for your family, for the people you care about. But at the same time, you now are able to kind of apply that to an opportunity, well, not only real estate being a financially lucrative opportunity, but also in an environment that allows you to do that. So what an incredible blessing. You know, one thing that you said that stuck out to me, because I'm a sibling, I have brothers and sisters, and my wife also has brothers and sisters, and we have close families, and I can't even imagine that level of separation. I mean, how did it feel when you came back together? What was that moment like for you when you finally got reunited after being on foot and running from a government with such oppression?
The only word to describe that moment is absolute beauty. So what happened was, and you're going down this rabbit hole, I don't even think you realize how intense this moment was, but let me try to paint you a picture.
Okay.
My mother was pregnant at the time she fled Romania. So imagine a pregnant woman fleeing the country on foot, and she's wrapping her children that she can carry in her arms and wrapping it up with rope so that her arms, they were numb at some point. When we lived my father, before he lived, let me preface by saying that my father had to, when he finally decided to leave, he left our brother and sister, Daniel and Simona, with a neighbor. He couldn't tell family. He couldn't tell people he knew, because during communism, if you would tell the police and if you would tell the Communist Party what other people were doing, you were rewarded. There was a system that rewarded people that basically, found secrets and told on people. And my dad couldn't do that. He basically walked to his neighbor one night and said, "I need you to watch my son and daughter just for a day. I'll be back shortly." And he left them there. And he said, if I turned around to think of the consequences, there's no way I could have left. And he said, I'll never forget, my little brother Daniel looked at him and said, "Dad, wherever you go, don't stay long." And my dad, with tears in his eyes, rushed out the door knowing that he couldn't stay a moment longer. The moment we were reunited, my mother being pregnant, living in a refugee camp, she had her child on March 6th, went to the hospital, had my sister Elizabeth, which was very, very stressful. As you can imagine, they don't speak German. My father, we're in the refugee camp. She came home that night, and in the refugee camp, there was all, sorts of children and people coming and going all the time. And she came home, and she's got her beautiful baby daughter there on her lap. And my father walks in with these two disheveled, dirty little kids. And she says, "Don't bring anybody else in the house right now. We've got a lot of things going." And he looks at her and says, "Vio, these are your kids." So in the morning, she had 3 children. And by the end of the day, she had 6. That was the moment. It was an absolutely incredible thing to be a part of. My brother Daniel, who's a year younger than me, I would have been 5, he would have been 4 at the time. He started calling me Mister, because he basically forgot who I was in the 8 to 9 months that he spent apart. So it was just an incredible moment for us as a family to be reunited, and I think it was probably the happiest moment in our lives. Because when you're going through that kind of intensity, imagine the mental anguish my parents in their 20s would have had, leaving 2 children behind, not knowing if they would be reunited. The only, I guess, piece of faith they had, other than in God, was assuming that if they got there and they landed in the refugee camp, at some point they hoped that the Red Cross would intervene and apply to bring their children over. But it was a world of uncertainty. It was a world of scarcity. And it was a world where it was easy to be fearful of everything around you. So my parents made a choice, and that choice was rewarded with the greatest of rewards, which is freedom. So that freedom we do not take for granted. That freedom is so deep in who we are that we have to do something significant with that freedom. It's almost a rebellion in a way, because we and myself refuse to be oppressed. We refuse to be told what, where, how to think, what to do. But with that freedom comes, for me, a massive responsibility. So it was such a unique moment for our family. I don't think you could ever forget something like that. It really leaves a lasting mark.
Well, I believe that's one of those times, regardless of your age, you might not know all of the little puzzle pieces in the scenario, but you can still feel and understand the weight and the significance of the moment. You can understand what it means, why it's important. And, there are moments in time, I believe, where you can look at your providers, whether it's a parent or a guardian or somebody important in your life, just that pinnacle of support and strength. And growing up, you always think, they're right and they know it all and all of this. I mean, not as in an arrogant way, they know it all, but legitimately you think that they know the world. But it's interesting because I feel there are these moments in your youth where you start to see the cracks of humanity in a person's being, and they come through authentic moments of genuine connection and beauty and love and grace and kindness and strength. And those you never forget. I remember, I talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago. I remember in 2008 in the United States when we had a financial crisis, as you know probably. I mean, the world, right? During that time, no one was really doing okay. I remember for me, there was this one moment in my life where I couldn't sleep. I've never really slept well. And I go out on my second story railing area. I just kind of walked out because I heard this sound. And I remember kneeling at the hearth, my father, just breaking down and praying, just, God, help save my business, because I didn't know it at the time, but his business was very, very, very close to being lost. And I sat and I watched him in faith and in sorrow and in just total humility think and pray and ask, just, Lord, you brought this business to bless our family. Please don't take it away. And for me, while not nearly as dramatic as your scenario of seeing that family reunited, it was a moment of recognizing those cracks, but in a beautiful way, because those moments of beauty really shape who we are and how we move. And there's something that you touched on, which I connect with in this version of that scenario, which is faith. Because you're convicted. Everything that you do is a movement by your faith. And as it is with me as well, I speak to it often, God moves first. And so I'm curious, was that a moment, seeing your parents' faith as they walked through, literally on foot, walked through oppression and left and fled? Was that an experience for you that helped solidify your own faith? Or did you have to relearn that as you grew up, started the business, attacked opportunity? Where did that really come into play for you and for your life?
So I would start by defining what I think faith is. And I think faith is the only thing that can drive us in that we are imperfect beings. And without having a center of faith, without being willing to do things, and faith for me is being able to act without seeing. That's what it is. Having seen my parents go through what they've gone through and been a part of that journey myself, it really solidified in me that anything in this world is possible to any person who decides to take charge and move forward. And that mindset has been with me since I was a little child. Now, the way the faith has developed in my Christianity, obviously, it changed and progressed and sometimes regressed, in my early adult years and things. And like a lot of us through teenage years, we go through some sort of rebellion and that kind of thing. But I would say for the most part, it's never left me. It's always been in the pit of my heart, knowing that if you want it bad enough, you can make it happen. And I am so blissfully ignorant of any other ideology or theology around the idea of faith, because once you've experienced that level of faith coming to fruition, it is impossible for me to think that there isn't faith in this world. So a lot of folks that haven't been through that situation, it's hard to articulate to them in a very tactical or tangible way what faith is. But for me, faith is the one thing that we had to have. It really developed everything else in our lives. So I think it's such a critical component that people who truly live a faith-filled life, they live a life of abundance. They live a life of purpose, because there are so many intangible things that you cannot see in this world. And to assume that you have to see them in order to achieve them is lunacy, because you'll never reach for the stars. You'll never reach for things that are beyond you. You'll never reach for things outside of what you know. Back in Romania, we didn't have television from the Western world. We didn't know what happened. We heard from our communist leaders that people in America were starving on the streets, and that Romania was a much better country because at least they could get food in the breadline. So we didn't have exposure to this way of thinking. My parents had a very rudimentary Christian-based faith philosophy, which is God will provide. If we just act through faith, God will provide. And whether you're a Bible believer or not a Bible believer, everybody has a different opinion and different, philosophy on life. But I don't think there's anything that you can do to remove faith from life. I think business, I think wealth, I think abundance only comes from faith, because you have to see it first. You have to, in your mind, believe it's possible for you to ever see it in your hand, right? We have this thing in our brain, the reticular activating system, the RAS, right? It's that filter. And if I live in a faith-filled world where I see what I want in my mind, even though I can't see it in my hand, even though I can't see the process of attaining it, my RAS is triggered all the time. I'm going to be focusing on things that will lead me towards that goal, that ambition. So I think faith can change. I think the way we process faith, the way we process action can change, but the rudimentary idea of faith remains a constant for me.
I love that. And I think that's articulated in a really beautiful way, because faith is obviously, for those that have a specific religion, extremely grounded in a spiritual faith. Yet the word faith is completely agnostic. It doesn't have a connection to, it can just simply be a connection to that future, the faith that it's possible, the faith that that the end goal isn't in question. And that's something that I had to do in my life, is I recognized and I started agreeing with myself that the end goal was not what's in question, it's how you get there. Because so many people start with the, oh my gosh, I hope that one day I might be able to maybe do X, buy the car, get the house, travel the world, get freedom, whatever it is. And when you hope that maybe you might be able to one day do that thing, it becomes extremely intangible. And more importantly, you start to give yourself opportunities to excuse yourself when you don't achieve it. Oh, well, I didn't do that because I had life get in the way or something like that. Now, that can happen, but I believe in total elimination of all excuses, like you said, through faith and understanding that the end goal is not what's in question. I literally, the other day, I drove by, you remember Billy, right, at the AC Boot Camp, the guy with his company Kingdom Content, does amazing content. Quick plug there for my friend. But he does all the stuff for Obsessed Academy. So Billy and I were filming some new content. We're driving around one of the wealthiest zip codes in Dallas called Highland Park. It's where owners of the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones live. I mean, you have houses there that can be upwards of $50 million. So a beautiful, beautiful part of town. Everything's manicured and curated. And when I was really young, I used to drive through that town. I mean, I literally got my license. The next week I would drive through that town because I didn't grow up there to see what's possible. And then when I got older, I got into real estate and then luxury real estate. And I started transacting some of these same houses that used to inspire me. And what I noticed were people again and again and again and again bought these types of houses and lived that type of lifestyle, not because they were given it, but because they realized that the end goal was not what's in question, it's how they got there. And so I adopted the same mindset, and it's helped me a ton. And so getting into a little more tangible reality of your life and your business, I see that lived through how you act every single day. And you have beautiful material things in your life. You have beautiful relationships in your life. But what I think more than anything is you're actually living a life fundamentally on the terms that you want it to be instead of somebody else's hand moving you instead. Yeah. And so my question would be, you're young, right? Right. How old are you now?
34.
34. Oh my gosh, man. So we're both young men, right? So we've got a lot of life, of life to live. But you've accomplished arguably what many people strive for that don't even hit in their 50s, 60s, or 70s. And I'm not saying this to put you on a pedestal, but more so, I want to highlight the reality that we're speaking with an individual here, you and I'm speaking with you, someone who's actually done it and achieved on a really large scale. And my question would be, breaking down your success at a young age, one of the things that you've inadvertently done is achieved immense speed. What were some of the key indicators or identifiers that you've been able to implement into your life to accomplish so much in such a short period of time? Are there some things you can think back to as, man, that 1, 2, or 3 things really helped me compound where I am today?
Yeah, there's a couple things that I really would focus on and highlight. I think the biggest thing I've realized early in life is my own ignorance. I knew that there were things that I didn't know. So I've tried to remain, and this is where the humble comes back in, try to remain a student all the time. I don't want to ever develop an ego that's going to hold me back. If you truly pursue truth. So for me, I'm a very truthful person. If 1 and 1 equals 2, I'm just going to say it equals 2. I don't want to manipulate. I don't want to conjure up a different theory around it. I just want to know the truth in life. And that for me is a sense of direction. So if you have said truth and you have that direction, then I think that the process is fairly straightforward. So in being a person seeking truth, I realized, hey, there are things that I don't know. There are things that other people know that I don't know. So if I can just get around people that know the things I don't know and the people that have accomplished the things that I desire to accomplish, then I can truly try to gain counsel from them. Okay. So that was probably my biggest piece, is remaining curious all the time and asking better and better and better questions. Now, remaining in the how can I state of mind versus the negative, pessimist. I've never been a glass half empty kind of guy. I've never been a person who sits back and criticizes and says, this guy has that, and that person has that. So being in that mindset of how can I, I'm like that Thomas the train engine. I'm trying to get up that hill as consistently, as quickly as possible in truth. And I know that there's things that I don't know. So really seeking the better way all the time. I am obsessed with finding a better way. I'm obsessed with finding a cleaner path, a better path, a quicker path than anybody else. I also realized early on that people are slow. They are indecisive. They take a long time to take action on something that they think about. So I recognized early on that if I could just move quicker than the next guy, I'd probably be able to acquire success faster as well. And I was willing to go through problems and trials and issues and failure because that's life. We go through that stuff anyways. I think that in every aspect of life, there's failure. If you're working a 9-to-5 job from the time that you're 20 till you're 65, I'm calling that failure. Because you failed to materialize on the things that you were capable of. The one thing I didn't want to do, my greatest fear in life, is not living my life to the maximum ability and to the maximum impact that I can have. So in seeking that truth, right? In seeking that truth, we have to act quickly. So I would rather move so fast and screw up so many times, but understand the truth of what I'm pursuing better and with more consistency than the next person. So even when I started, like when I was younger, I dropped out of school so I could start a cleaning janitorial business. And I was out there cleaning floors every night myself, right? And I was cleaning these floors because during the day I could spend my time trying to research real estate, research business opportunities, look at different things. I just think a lot of us, we get this analysis paralysis mindset. And I've kind of found a hack around it. And I used to get it too, because I'm very much a nuts and bolts kind of guy. Just give me the nuts and bolts, save the drama for your mama. Let me just do what I need to do, right? Just give me the actionable steps and let me just go to work. I don't need to be motivated. I think a lot of times we try to wait for our emotions to drive us to do the things that we know are right and wrong. And if you decide to live a truth-driven life, then you don't have time for opinions. You don't have time for emotions. It's either right or it's wrong. So if it's the right thing, you just do the right thing. And I think a lot of times we want to feel good. We want to feel motivated to go out and take action. Well, in the middle of taking action, you'll get motivated, right? The way that you proceed and you move forward, if you're consistent in your activities, eventually you'll find comfort in the consistency. And in that consistency comes motivation. So I think those are the two big elements for me, was that I remain ignorant, I remain humble. And humble means different things to different people. The word humble for me is never forget where you came from. Never forget the experiences that you've gone through. Never forget the lessons that you've developed. Never forget the wisdom and the discernment of that wisdom that you've had to process through. And then just take more action than the next person, because the world is slow. So if you're willing to just move through faith, and then I'll add one last element here. Faith has always been something that you mentioned it a little bit earlier, so let me touch on that. Faith for me is the accelerator. It's the gasoline on the fire. If I know that in truth, I need to go from point A to point B, right? I may not know the tactical movements I need to make to get there, but I know that I need to get to that point. So I have to reverse engineer my goal. Faith is the one driver that will keep pushing you to keep taking the next steps through failure, through consequence, through issues. Faith is what moves you. So I'm just so blissfully faithful in what I need to do that you can't hold me back. Hey, Mr. Mearson, you screwed up on this thing. Okay, cool. I'm doing cold calls. Hey, I know I'm rejecting your offer. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. You have to move through these issues quickly. I think we hit these roadblocks, and I think we take a step back in life. And then the one big question I ask myself on a consistent basis is this: when I'm 70 years old, does it matter? Does it matter what that person thought of me? Does it matter what this person tried to do to me? Does it matter what this situation did? Does it matter? And the answer is going to be no. All that matters is, did I honor my father's legacy? Did I honor the commitment and the sacrifice that they had to make to get us to this point? I either did or I didn't. So I want to live in such massive purpose that the answer is abundantly yes. So I think those are the characteristics, is that you look at resiliency in a person, and your form of resiliency, the more you can develop that thick skin, I think the more equipped you are to deal with this world. Because it's not an easy ride. People just assume you follow steps 1, 2, 3 and you become wealthy. That's not how it works. Yeah. You have to create wealth. You can't earn it. Far too many people try to earn it the old school way. I was focused on creation. God created us. I love to create music. How do I create a business? How do I satisfy a need in the marketplace? Create your way to success. So those are the 3 points I would touch on in that respect.
I love that, but I also want to highlight the fact that in that compression of time where it took a decade or a little more instead of decades or a lifetime, you still have unbelievably high levels of intense work within that time. It's just most people, let's say you work a 9 to 5, which is a standard workday here in the United States, maybe an 8 to 5, something like that, 9 to 5. That still leaves a lot of the day open to do other things.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying, so many people say, oh my gosh, my day. Well, in reality, even if it's an hour commute, you've got time in the morning and time in the evening to focus on what's important. And I love this conversation because somebody asked me on another show that I was interviewed on a couple of weeks back, just how did you do it, right? So same question we're having. Our conversation built around just, tell me about how you did. Everybody wants to know how you did it, right? Whenever you're young, especially. And I don't think it's a bad question, but the reality is not sexy, right? Well, how did you build up this business and all that? And I said, what I did was I sat down with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, but girlfriend at the time, and I sat down with my friends and I sat down with my family and I said, I'm going after this thing and it's going to take me away from these relationships for a while. And I need you to know that this is my focus, not because I don't want to be here with you, but because I want to be here in a more present manner later. And I'm willing to sacrifice the short term now for a lifetime worth of accountability, opportunity, and comfort. And then I put my head down and for 7.5 years, worked 13 to 16 to 18 hour workdays, 6 and 7 days a week, and didn't really do much else. And I remember there have been times where, as years now, I would go to sleep at night, my eyes literally hurting because I would be working so much. And I'm not saying that that's the only way to do it. What I'm saying is that the reality is really not sexy. It's just not. It's okay, you've got this big goal and you want to go towards it, but the reality of the work is really, really, really not sexy. But what you actually talked about, Ben, is compressing the amount of time that you stay in a loss. Okay, so somebody doesn't like the content I put out. Great, I'm going to move on. I have one problem with one employee. Well, would that problem still be top of mind and take all day if you had 1,000 employees? Right? It's we maximize in the micro these tiny little issues that we blow up because we really want to be taken away from the reality of you have to put your face down and work. And that's a really hard scenario. Well, let's deal with this emotional situation. It gives me an opportunity to release. It gives me an opportunity to be undisciplined and emotional. I can shout a little bit. I can be angry. I can have a, quote, bad day, when in reality, that small thing could just be handled in that moment. And so our principle at Obsessed Academy that we've talked about, a lot is speed, right? Commit first, figure it out later. That's also committing to not being stuck in the minutia of crap that comes up when you own a business. So as your business has grown, Ben, I'm curious, what were some of the issues that you thought might have been solved as you got more successful that really only amplified as your income and your business scaled up? Because a lot of times people think that money and success solves everything, but it really doesn't, does it?
No, not at all. I would say that success for me is very binary. It's the daily consistent actions you do every day. And I think a lot of times the things that probably held me back the most was thinking too small. I would look at a micro level, like you just explained, an issue with an employee, an issue with a customer, an issue with capital. And I would say, how do I solve for X? What I should have been doing is saying, not how do I solve for $1,000 today, but how do I solve for $100,000 so I never have to have this conversation again?
Right.
We keep going back into the same conversations with ourselves, with our customers, with our partners, because we're not willing to solve for the macro event. So I want to stop playing checkers and play chess. I want to focus on larger moves, larger strategic moves, because those are actually worth solving for. With scalability comes this amazing ability to look at things extremely objectively. And I think when we don't look at it that way, we're dealing in our emotional consciousness, right? So we start looking at these problems in a very emotional state of mind. We create our own drama. We create our own stories. We create significance out of insignificant things, right? And we actually allow a lot more of this emotional intelligence, let's call it, to be thrown around, to be, it really destroys the rest of what we're trying to accomplish. So if you take a step back and look at things less emotionally, and that's what I found for myself, because I'm an emotional guy, I'm an emotional being, right?
Sure.
Spiritual being. So it's easy to get upset, it's easy to get passionate. I'm a very passionate person. But I realized that my passion needs to be directed towards its highest and best use. Just like real estate, we have a highest and best use of everything, right? Are we applying enough pressure in the right areas, or are we applying extraordinary pressure in the wrong areas? So yes, I worked for 10 years. I would never call that a waste of time. I would call it the greatest learning lesson of my life. And I realized that had I just played bigger from day one, I guarantee that a lot of those things maybe that held me back would not have held me back. I was asking the wrong questions.
Yes, and that concept of thinking much larger than the actual situation, that applies to everything. And I'm so grateful that you touched on that because I fundamentally believe that in everything I do, right? The problem isn't the fact that you had one customer drop off. The problem is the fact that you didn't have so much volume to make that drop off insignificant.
You only had one customer.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
only had one customer.
Right?
You should have had more. That's right.
Exactly. The problem isn't that you have $1,000 issue. The problem is that you don't have enough income to make that insignificant. The problem isn't that you and your spouse are fighting. The problem doesn't need to be that solution in that fight. How do we solve this one thing? The problem is, how do we create an environment that fosters such an incredible relationship that we don't fight about somebody not doing the dishes, right? Something like that, where you look at the overarching picture of whatever situation you're dealing with that's causing an issue in your day is usually indicative of a larger issue that you're not solving that keeps popping off these tiny, tiny little things that take up your time, energy, and resources. And that's a catch of small business and self-employment is it's usually not until you start expanding to the level where you actually get to that 10, 15, 20, 30,000 view that so many people objectively talk about. It's usually not until you're there that you really see it. So I'm so grateful you brought that to light because I think it's a powerful point of conversation. So, I mean, Ben, you and I could just go all friggin' day. I love the content that you put down. I love the fire you put down. But to be respectful of your time while you're in Austin, as we close, I'm curious, what are some final points of thought or something that you'd be interested in sharing with the audience so they can really take away your message and the ultimate core and mission of who you are and what you do, and maybe even apply it to their own life or life's work?
I have a couple of points, a couple of things that I always kind of push for that I think are vital and help a lot of people. The first is this, is that we tend to complicate the uncomplicated. So we need to remove as much drama from our lives as possible. I've got a saying at my office that it's data over drama is one of our core values. So let's shoot to uncomplicated. I think making money is not that hard. Growing a business is not that hard. Is it work? Yes. Is it a lot of consistent action over time? Yes. But is it hard? I don't think so. I think we make it more difficult because we create these stories. So I would encourage all the listeners to just step back for a moment, look at the macro event and say, hey, this is not that hard. I need to get a mentor. I need to get around somebody who knows what's going on. I need to just apply the work consistently, keep the drama to a minimum, and I can just make it happen. Let's not complicate. The second big message is dream bigger than what you're dreaming. You're going to spend so much of your time. And I like Grant Cardone for this in his 10X message that, spend 10 times the amount of effort to achieve something. I think before you do that, you have to have 10 times the amount of vision that you have today. You're going to be working anyways. You're going to be out there anyways. Why not spend time on your highest and best activities and start really scaling your efforts and leveraging your time accordingly? If you don't think it's possible, you're never going to achieve it. So the first step, I believe, is this blissful abundance mindset where you're just always pursuing much, much bigger things. Dream big. Let other people criticize you. It doesn't matter. Dream bigger than what you're dreaming. Take bigger actions than what you're taking. You perceive it as risk, but the risk is in playing small. The risk is landlords who come to me and say, Ben, I've got a 60% ROI, but it only equals $200 a month of cash flow. That's not sustainable. That's not money. $200 is $200. Right. If you can get a 60% ROI, get a 40% and play much bigger. I've got friends who are my age who own 3,500 units. I've also got friends that are my age that own 3 units. You know who is happier? The answer is neither of them. It doesn't make a difference. One guy's just playing bigger, one guy's playing smaller, but the guy playing bigger is getting a much bigger reward for his time and his energy. So those are my 2 points. Live through faith, take massive action, dream bigger than what you're dreaming today, and realize that it's really not that hard. We complicate it because we haven't put enough consistent action over time. It's like that book, The Slight Edge. It's so easy to do the daily consistent habits. The reason people do them is because it's just as easy to not do it today. And if you understand that revelation, you'll recognize the power of just doing it today and not putting it off until tomorrow, because tomorrow has new challenges, new opportunities, and new things you can do. Exactly. That's my advice, my friend.
Well, I love that, Ben. And in a very literal sense, the example would be when you come back from vacation and your desk is totally full and it takes 3 days to get back through everything. Well, but we do that in our own lives through just our daily work. This morning I was looking at my to-do list, and my concept in a similar capacity is earning your sleep. I believe that if you're blessed to be going to sleep next to somebody that you love, who loves you, in a home that's, got the proper shelter and a full fridge, you need to re-earn that every single day. And part of that is ending the day through accomplishment and not through default. My day doesn't end because the sun goes down. My day ends because I earned the right to go back and go to sleep next to my wife at home. And so if you're listening to this, really pause and rewind and listen to what Ben just said. And the reality is it's hard work, but it's simple execution. We overcomplicate. And so many people want to sell you this fake reality of business that it's just so damn hard. No, in reality, it's hard work, but the process is simple. And people don't want to admit that it's a simple process because failing in simplicity is really hard to manage. So listen to what Ben is saying. Listen to what he's talking about here, because when applied to your life, these components can be truly transformational. So as we finally conclude here, Ben, I'm curious if you wouldn't mind sharing, where can people find you, engage with you, do business with you? Man, they want to connect. They love who you are. Where do they go?
Well, the first place, connect with me. I'm giving out tons of content. You can jump right on my website, which is humble.ceo, humble.ceo, or jump on social media. I'm active on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook under Ben Humble CEO, or my full name, Benjamin Mureshan. You're better off to just go to Ben Humble CEO, because good luck trying to spell that out. But yeah, we're dropping a lot of value there daily, because I truly believe there's a movement happening around the world of successful business owners who are open, like yourself, Evan. You're such a successful young guy. Actually, I think you're probably the most successful guy I know for your age. So I'm very honored to share this stage with you here today. But I truly think there's a great movement of successful leaders and successful thinkers willing to share the abundance, because once you've made enough money for your own needs, the only thing that's satisfying is serving others.
Wow. Well, no more powerful point to end than that one. So if you're listening to this episode, I will put in the show notes links back to Ben's website, his social, and ultimately, Ben, thank you so much for taking your time and bringing such incredible value. Cannot wait to have you back on the show, maybe in a year or so, and get a little bit of an update on what's happened so far since the first episode. So thank you for the time.
My pleasure. Thank you, Evan.